I recall the first statement of the theory, writes Ruizs, a story begins when somebody wants something and someone else doesn't want them to have it. From that point on, through various digressions, all the elements of the story are arranged around the central conflict, end of quote. In critic David Bordwell's rendering, the script manual for classical Hollywood cinema's realist storyline, the implied target of Ruiz's parody reads as follows, and I quote from Bordwell, and it's exactly what Ruizs says. The classical Hollywood film presents psychologically defined individuals who struggle to solve a clear-cut problem or attain specific goals. In the course of this struggle, the characters enter into conflict with others or with external circumstances. The story ends with a decisive victory or defeat, a resolution of the problem and a clear achievement of or non-achievement of the goals. Bad guy versus good guy. Okay, so it's a very, very melodramatic plot line. Classical Hollywood cinema creates the smooth, seamless illusion for which it has been so influential around the world through its continuity principles, which it applies across all dimensions of cinema: narration, mise en scène, and cinematography. Narration is linear, telling a story as a chain of cause and effect set in continuous time and space. Mise en scène is realist, while taking into account the standards of realism have changed with time. Finally, cinematography and editing are invisible, subordinated to the fictional story. Throughout, form follows function, just like classicism and minimalism. Cinematic techniques are treated as mere vehicles to render the story transparent without calling attention to the cinematic medium. For example, frequently the camera moves only when the characters move to keep the subject within the frame. Visible jump cuts are forbidden, the kind of Godard, don't do that. Classical Hollywood's so-called voyeurism results from the systematic cinematic adaptation of the paradigm of Renaissance classicism. That is, the image is a transparent window into space. You look at the film, it's a transparent image into the real world. Some of its techniques, such as, for instance, specific techniques of Hollywood films, such as three-point lighting. Okay, so you got key light, you got fill light that fills the whole room, and backlighting on a single figure. Easily translates into Wölflin's categories of classical or absolute clarity. That's the use of lighting is always clear and evenly distributed light. Even if you don't see the light, it's invisible. It's like water. Indeed, Bordwell has defined pre-1960s Hollywood cinema according to the Renaissance and 18th century neoclassical models in the visual arts and drama. The use of enclosed, self-contained forms, we already heard that, the notorious three unities of time, space, and action, and the classicist rule that form follows function. Ruizs relates how, as a beginning filmmaker in the 1960s, he encountered the Hollywood model as rigid and immutable, almost universal system. What Ruizs finds problematic about central conflict theory, his grand metaphor for the Hollywood continuity principles, which he learned when he was studying cinema at universities, both in the US and South America, is precisely its exclusionary linear logic. It, quote, forces us to eliminate all stories which do not include confrontation and to leave aside all those events which require only indifference or detached curiosity, like a landscape, a distant storm, or dinner with friends, unless such scenes punctuate two fights with bad guys between the bad guys and the good guys. Okay, then it matters. In contrast, Ruizs proposes that, quote, it is the type of the image produced that determines the narrative, and not the reverse, the image-focused, not narrative-focused. In short, Ruizs recasts the notion of cinema by reversing priorities. Whereas classical realist film, as a Hollywood example of classical Hollywood cinema, valorizes character, causality, and conflict over the cinematic image, Ruizs places the cinematic image, and by extension the cinematic medium, at the center. Ruizs liberates cinematic form and style from service to function. And it shouldn't escape anyone's notice how closely Ruiz's cinematic anti-realism and anti-functionalism corresponds to Severo Sardui's theories of Neobaroque artificialization. As the apotheosis of artifice and the mockery of nature, the Baroque, according to Severo Sardui, unmasks realist and mimetic representation as the fabrication that it actually is. It always shows like you're representing things always through a certain medium. It always shows like makes the medium obvious, what medium of representation. As in Sardui, Ruiz's cinematic neo-Baroque is a rebellion against functionalism and the functionalist subordination of language and style to reference. In particular, the reduction of the cinematic medium to an invisible vehicle of the message. You know, you've got, I mean, it's like the Baroque spectacle. You've got this incredible technology of cinema, and what you do with it, you make it a slave to a silly melodramatic story, according to Ruizs, you know, bad guy versus good guy. And you use the technique of cinema just like hide that, you just make it at most transparent. So Ruizs wants, like, you know, just let all this, pull all the stop gaps in cinema, in the technology, just let it play. Along these lines, one entire chapter in Paradox of Cinema, entitled Shadows, is dedicated to attacking the Hollywood principle of evenly spread invisible lighting. In today's cinema, Ruizs affirms, there's too much light. It is time to return to the shadows. And he also says, a lighting technician is above all a maker of shadows. Though nobody seems to notice. And shadow is a plea for Baroque irrational dramatic lighting, Caravaggio, you know, that heightens emotional tension, including effects such as the chiaroscuro style cultivated by Caravaggio and other Baroque artists. It also invokes Christine Bucci-Glucksmann's theory of Baroque visuality, the madness of vision. You know, that vision is irrational and not rational. You don't see clearly, you see obscurely, obfuscated vision, which elaborates the anti-rationalist and anti-objectivist qualities of Baroque visual culture. Visual culture is not objective. It's not about objectivism, objective representation. It's about all sorts of other things. Furthermore, and here's closing paragraph. Furthermore, Ruizs, like Sarduy, delights in the conspicuous wastefulness of Baroque style. He has invented a cinematic style in which digression, loose threads intentionally placed in the way of the red line of the plot, break the illusion. And you all stumbled over it yesterday when you asked this question. It's like, what about Sinbad the sailor? You know, Sinbad the sailor. It's something to stumble over. It's a digression. It's a detour. Breaks the illusion. And also other things. Recall the toy train running through the cinema. It's got no function. Recall the live chickens walking around the cinema. No function. Or the birds flying around the darkened theater. You know, it's got birds. Ruiz's runaway digressive style is the cinematic equivalent of circular, rambling, ornate Baroque prose, as in, for instance, William Faulkner, Absalom. It's just like that. Let the cinema run riot, basically, the techniques of cinema. And both are instances of the quintessential Baroque circumlocution that Sarduy so aptly theorized in his notion of radial reading, that a chain of signifiers performs around an absent signified, tracing an orbit all around it. You know, it's like this is absent. You know, we've all seen this. You know, the diagram that Sarduy has. It's like a circle around in the middle, never reaches the signified in the middle. It just keeps going around and around.